The night was cold, the kind of biting cold that stung the lungs. Marcus Johnson walked home from his late shift at the factory, shoulders slumped, boots caked in mud. He was 27, tired, and broke, but not broken. Then, under the dim glow of a flickering streetlight, he saw them. 2 kids. A boy, maybe 10, trying to shield his little sister with nothing but his thin jacket. Their faces were hollow, dirt smudged on their cheeks, eyes wide with that desperate fear only the abandoned carry. "Please, sir," the boy whispered when Marcus approached, "we don't got nowhere." Marcus should have walked on. He could barely pay rent. His fridge rattled like an empty tin can. But something in their trembling voices dug into him like a nail. He saw himself in them, because he, too, once knew what it was to be left with nothing. So he did the unthinkable. He took them in. A fragile beginning. The kids Ethan and Lily were white, and Marcus was painfully aware of the whispers when his neighbors saw him walking them inside. In their neighborhood, a black man taking in 2 homeless white children wasn't charity, it was suspicious. But Marcus didn't care. He gave them the only bed he had and slept on the couch himself. At first, it was rough. Ethan didn't trust him, always clutching his sister's hand and glaring. Lily cried at night, calling for a mother who never returned. Marcus cooked what little he could afford: beans, rice, day-old bread, and sometimes pretended he wasn't hungry so the kids would eat more. Slowly, trust grew. Ethan started doing homework at the table. Lily painted on scraps of paper Marcus brought home from work. They began to laugh again, even in the smallest moments. And Marcus, though he never said it out loud, felt something stir in him, the fragile warmth of a family he never thought he'd have. The world against them. But the world doesn't easily forgive kindness. One afternoon, Child Protective Services showed up at his door. Someone had called. A black man keeping white kids? That doesn't sound right. They threatened to take Ethan and Lily away. Marcus, heart pounding, begged them to let the kids stay. He worked extra hours, filled out endless forms, proved again and again that he wasn't a danger but a protector. It was a battle of patience, but he won. The kids stayed. Yet the system kept an eye on him, always ready to snatch them back. Money was tight. There were nights Marcus skipped dinner, nights he swallowed pride and borrowed from co-workers just to buy school shoes. Racism followed him like a shadow, at grocery stores, at the bank, even when Ethan and Lily introduced him at school events as the man who takes care of us. People smiled tight smiles, but judgment clung heavy in the air. Still, Marcus held on. Family is what you fight for, he'd tell them, not just what you're given. 20 years later. Time marched on. Ethan grew into a determined young man, Lily into a gentle but fierce woman. They went to college, worked jobs, built lives. And through every milestone, Marcus was there, cheering the loudest at graduations, saving for their birthdays, clapping proudly at Lily's art exhibits. He was the anchor of their world. But then came the storm. One night, Marcus was in the wrong place at the wrong time. A robbery turned violent in the convenience store across from where he stood. Shots were fired. Panic erupted. When the police arrived, they saw a black man near the scene, his hands trembling, trying to help the wounded cashier. They didn't ask questions. They arrested him. The life sentence. The trial was brutal. Witnesses were shaky, evidence thin, but bias ran thick. Marcus's history, poor, black, suspicious, has painted him guilty in the jury's eyes before the first argument ended. When the gavel struck, the words cut like knives. Life sentence. Marcus sat in the courtroom, chains on his wrists, his chest heavy with disbelief. He had given everything to build a life for Ethan and Lily, and now, it seemed, everything was being stripped away. Ethan and Lily's fight. But this time, Marcus wasn't alone. Ethan and Lily, no longer the scared children he once sheltered, rose like warriors. They refused to let the man who saved them rot behind bars. Ethan dug through every legal file, studied law after work, and knocked on the doors of lawyers until someone listened. Lily launched a campaign, spoke on stages, painted murals of Marcus's face with the words, "Innocence deserves freedom." The years of injustice they once suffered gave them grit. They raised money, gathered petitions, unearthed surveillance footage the prosecution had ignored. They stood before cameras, telling the world, "This man saved us. Now we must save him." And the tide began to turn. The day of freedom. 20 years after Marcus first carried two shivering children into his tiny apartment, those same children, now grown, stood in court, voices steady, evidence in hand. The judge reviewed the new proof, the real suspect identified, Marcus's innocence clear as day. And then, with the hammer of justice this time falling true, the words rang out. Case dismissed. Marcus Johnson, you are free. The return home. When the prison gates opened, Marcus stepped out, older, weathered, but unbroken. Waiting for him were Ethan and Lily, tears running down their cheeks. They ran to him, hugging him with the same desperation they once had as children. "We told you we'd bring you home," Ethan whispered. And Marcus, eyes wet, finally smiled. "Family," he said softly, "always finds a way." The message. This story isn't just about race, or injustice, or survival, it's about the power of compassion that defies the world's cruelty. One man's act of kindness saved two children. And when the world turned on him, those children grew into the shield that saved him back. Call to action, glowing star. If this story touched you, drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were Marcus that night under the street light? And don't forget to subscribe to Be Kind Always, where stories like this remind us that even the smallest act of kindness can ripple across lifetimes. Because kindness sometimes saves lives.